came the night everything changed. It was a Friday, and I had gotten home earlier than usual from work. Lily had mentioned she'd be late again, something about a networking event. I didn't think much of it until I noticed her laptop on the dining room table. It was open, and a message thread caught my eye. Curiosity turned into dread as I read the texts. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same hotel as last time. I felt the blood drain from my face. The sender's name was Work Client. Clever. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. I took pictures of the messages with my phone before shutting the laptop. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. That night, I told Lily I had plans with an old friend from college and wouldn't be home. I followed her instead, parking a few blocks away from the address she'd entered into her Jeep. It was a boutique hotel on the edge of town, the kind of place couples go when they don't want to be seen. I waited in my car for what felt like hours until I saw her. Lily, dressed to kill, walking arm in arm with a man I'd never seen before. They laughed as they disappeared through the front doors. I could have walked away then, but something in me snapped. I wasn't about to let this play out without knowing everything. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, watching the hotel entrance. Anger churned in my gut, but I held myself in check. Bursting into that room, fists flying, might feel satisfying in the moment, but it would only play into her game. Lily would twist it, make me the villain, and claim I had overreacted. No, I needed something stronger than emotion. I needed evidence. Before I could talk myself out of it, I left the car and walked into the hotel. The lobby was small and dimly lit, with soft music playing in the background. A young man at the front desk looked up as I approached. I forced a casual smile, masking the fury burning inside me. "Excuse me," I said, sliding a folded $50 across the counter. "My wife just called me, and she forgot to give me the room number for a surprise. She's meeting a friend here. Lily Carter. Can you help me out?" The receptionist hesitated for a moment before glancing at his computer. "Room 307, he said quietly. I nodded in thanks and walked toward the elevators, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. When I reached the third floor, I paused outside room 307. A muffled laugh seeped through the door, unmistakably Lily's. That confident, carefree laugh she used when she thought she was in control. My hand hovered over the doorknob, but I didn't turn it. I couldn't, not yet. I needed to be smart about this. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the voice recorder app. Pressing record, I held the device close to the door. It didn't take long for their conversation to confirm my worst fears. "You're such a tease, you know that," the man said, his voice oozing with smug satisfaction. "You like it," Lily replied, her tone dripping with flirtation. "Besides, it's not like he suspects anything. He's too busy being Mr. Reliable to notice." The man laughed, and I could hear movement, clothing rustling, footsteps crossing the room. "How long are you planning to string him along?" he asked. "Until I'm bored," Lily replied without hesitation. My grip tightened around the phone. Every word was another dagger in my chest, but I forced myself to keep listening. "He's useful for now," Lily continued. "But let's be honest, it's you I want. He's just convenient." That was all I needed. I turned and left the hotel, my mind racing. The humiliation burned, but beneath it was a cold determination. Lily thought she was untouchable, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She underestimated me. Back in my car, I reviewed the recording, making sure everything was clear. My hands were trembling, but my resolve was steady. This wasn't just about catching her in the act anymore. This was about dismantling her lies and making her regret ever crossing me. By the time I got home, the anger had transformed into a focused, icy clarity. This wasn't going to be a screaming match or some messy public confrontation. Lily had made this personal, but I'd deal with it on my terms. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to take her world apart piece by piece. The first thing I did was back up the recording, ensuring it was saved in multiple places. My laptop, a cloud drive, and a secure USB drive I hid in my office drawer. Evidence was power, and I planned to use it wisely. Then, I called a lawyer. It was late, but I left a detailed message explaining the situation and requested a meeting at the earliest opportunity. If Lily thought I was Mr. Reliable, I'd lean into it, methodically, calculatingly, to her detriment. The next morning, Lily breezed into the house as if nothing had happened. She even kissed me on the cheek, her smile radiant. "Morning. How was your night?" she asked, her tone so casual it was almost impressive. The sheer audacity of it made my stomach churn, but I smiled back. "Fine. Just caught up with an old friend." "You?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Oh, the usual," she replied, her voice dripping with feigned nonchalance. "Networking events are always so dull." I nodded, pretending to accept her lie. "Must be exhausting," I said. "It is," she sighed dramatically, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Anyway, I have to run some errands today." "What's your plan?" "Just some house stuff," I replied. "Might tackle the garage." She nodded, already looking past me. It was a talent of hers, to treat people like accessories to her narrative. But I wasn't part of her story anymore. I was writing my own. That afternoon, I started gathering more evidence. Lily had underestimated my resourcefulness. I logged into our shared bank account and reviewed her recent transactions. Sure enough, there were charges to the boutique hotel, bars I'd never heard of, and even a couple of upscale restaurants where I'd never been invited. I documented it all, taking screenshots and printing them for good measure. I also checked the call logs on our shared phone plan. She was thorough, I'd give her that, but not thorough enough. The same number had appeared multiple times in her call history, likely her lover. I jotted it down and made a note to dig deeper. By evening, I had a growing arsenal of evidence, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. She came home, kissed me on the cheek again, and chatted about her errands as though everything was normal. I played along, smiling and nodding in all the right places. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I made a vow to myself. Lily would pay for her betrayal, and when she did, she'd realize just how wrong she'd been to underestimate me. The following week was a masterclass in deception. I played my role as the oblivious husband perfectly, while behind the scenes, I was laying the groundwork for her downfall. Every interaction with Lily felt like a performance. Her lies, once infuriating, now felt like fuel. Each smirk, each dismissive glance only strengthened my resolve. It was a Wednesday evening when I hit my first breakthrough. I'd used the number from Lily's call logs to trace her lover. A simple reverse lookup revealed his name, Brandon Walsh. A little more digging showed he worked as a sales manager at a local tech company. He was handsome. I'd give him that. Well-dressed, confident, the kind of guy who could charm his way through life. He was also married. That little detail was going to come in handy. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could about Brandon. His LinkedIn, social media accounts, and even a few old news articles about his company provided a treasure trove of information. His wife, Lauren, was also easy to track down. She had an active Instagram page filled with photos of their 2 kids, their suburban home, and the life they'd built together. Perfect. But I wasn't just going to confront Brandon or expose him to his wife. That would be too direct, too impulsive. I needed something more elegant, a way to ensure they couldn't squirm out of this with half-truths or apologies. Meanwhile, Lily continued her charade. On Friday night, she casually mentioned another networking event. I smiled and wished her luck, then waited for her to leave. 15 minutes later, I was in my car, tailing her once again. Sure enough, she met Brandon at the same boutique hotel. This time, I didn't just record audio. I took photos and videos from the parking lot, capturing every intimate moment I could. They were careless, oblivious to the world around them. When they disappeared into the hotel, I felt the anger rise again, but I forced myself to remain calm. This wasn't the time for confrontation. I wasn't done building my case. The next morning, while Lily slept in, I put the finishing touches on my plan. I drafted an anonymous email to Lauren, attaching the photos, videos, and recordings I'd collected. I didn't say much, just enough to let her know the truth. I scheduled the email to send that evening, giving me time to prepare for the fallout. Lily, completely unaware, spent the day shopping and meeting friends. She even invited me to join her for lunch, as if she were trying to maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage. I declined, claiming I had work to catch up on. The truth was, I didn't want to be anywhere near her. Not when I knew the storm that was about to hit. That evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, my phone buzzed. It was a notification confirming the email had been sent. I glanced at Lily, who was scrolling through her phone, completely oblivious. "Everything okay?" she asked without looking up. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Everything's fine." But everything was far from fine, and soon, she'd know it too. Sunday morning started like any other. Lily was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she made coffee, completely unaware of the chaos brewing just beyond her neatly curated world. I sat at the dining table, pretending to read the paper, but my focus was on my phone, waiting for the fallout. It didn't take long. Around 10 a.m., Lily's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and quickly silenced it. I couldn't see the name, but I had a good idea who it was. A minute later, another call came through. This time, she sighed and picked up. "Hello?" she said, her tone sharp. "What? No, I don't know what you're talking about." Her expression darkened as she listened to the person on the other end. She turned away from me, but I could hear the tension in her voice. "You're overreacting," she said quickly. "Don't jump to conclusions." She ended the call abruptly, muttering under her breath. I fought to keep my face neutral as she paced the kitchen, her fingers flying across her phone screen. It didn't take a genius to guess that Brandon was in trouble, and by extension, so was she. Over the next hour, she received more calls and texts. Each one seemed to fray her composure further. By noon, she was visibly agitated, snapping at me over trivial things. When I casually asked if everything was okay, she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just work stuff," she said, brushing it off. "Nothing to worry about." "Must be a rough day," I replied, my tone as neutral as I could manage. Inside, I was savoring every moment. Later that afternoon, while Lily was in the shower, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Lauren, Brandon's wife. "Lauren, thank you for letting me know. I had no idea. He's trying to deny it, but your evidence is undeniable. I'm filing for divorce. If you need anything, let me know." I stared at the message for a moment, letting the satisfaction wash over me. Lily and Brandon had built their affair on lies and deceit, and now their carefully constructed web was unraveling. But this was just the beginning. When Lily emerged from the shower, she looked rattled but tried to play it cool. I pretended not to notice, keeping the conversation light and inconsequential. Let her squirm, I thought. The trap was closing, and she didn't even realize it. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I decided to test the waters. "You've been on your phone a lot today," I said casually. "Everything okay?" Lily froze for a fraction of a second before plastering on a smile. "Just work drama," she said. "It's nothing." "Must be some drama," I said, my voice laced with feigned concern. "You seem tense." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't take the bait. "I'm fine," she said curtly. For now, I let it go. There was no need to push. She'd already started to crack, and it was only a matter of time before she completely unraveled. Monday morning, the facade began to crumble. Lily was noticeably on edge, her usual confident demeanor replaced with something brittle and raw. Her phone buzzed constantly, and though she tried to brush it off, her distracted behavior was impossible to miss. I watched from the doorway as she scrambled to get ready for work. She rifled through her purse, muttering under her breath. Her phone chimed again, and she snatched it up with more force than necessary. "Damn it, Brandon," she hissed, though she probably didn't realize she'd said it out loud. "Everything okay?" I asked, leaning casually against the doorframe. She flinched and looked up, startled. "Yeah, fine," she said quickly, avoiding my eyes. "Just a client being needy." Her excuse would have been more convincing if her hands weren't shaking as she stuffed her phone back into her bag. I resisted the urge to smirk. The pressure was getting to her, and it was only going to get worse. That afternoon, I received another message from Lauren. This time, she included a screenshot of an email exchange between her and Brandon. He was desperate, pleading with her to forgive him and insisting that the affair had been a mistake. But Lauren wasn't buying it, and she made that clear in her replies. "Lauren, you humiliated me, Brandon. You jeopardized everything we built together. Don't contact me again unless it's about the divorce." I couldn't help but admire her resolve. Brandon was floundering, and it was only a matter of time before he dragged Lily down with him. That evening, as Lily sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I decided to poke the hornet's nest a little. "You seem quiet," I said, glancing over at her. "Long day?" She didn't look up. "Yeah, just work stuff," she mumbled. I nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I ran into someone from your office the other day." I lied. "They mentioned there's been a lot of tension at work lately. Something about personal issues causing distractions?" Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a flash of panic before she quickly masked it. "Who said that?" she demanded. "Oh, just someone," I said with a shrug, letting the implication hang in the air. "Nothing to worry about, I'm sure." She narrowed her eyes, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was starting to suspect something, though she couldn't yet piece it together. That was fine by me. The more she squirmed, the better. Around midnight, when Lily was asleep, I slipped out of bed and into my office. I reviewed all the evidence I'd gathered, organizing it into neat folders labeled by date and type. Photos, videos, recordings, financial statements, it was all there. I even had copies of Brandon's desperate emails to Lauren, which she'd graciously forwarded to me. This wasn't just a plan anymore. It was a masterpiece, and Lily was about to be its unwitting star. By Tuesday, the cracks in Lily's carefully constructed persona were glaring. She was snappier, more irritable, and her once perfect composure had morphed into thinly veiled anxiety. I watched her unravel with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knew he had the upper hand. That morning, as she was getting ready for work, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, muttered something under her breath, and quickly shoved the phone into her bag. "Who's blowing up your phone this early?" I asked casually from the kitchen. "Just work," she snapped, not even bothering to mask her irritation. "Must be important," I replied with a knowing smirk. She shot me a sharp look but said nothing, grabbing her keys and heading out the door. As soon as she was gone, I moved into phase 2 of my plan. I reached out to a private investigator I'd been referred to by my lawyer. While I already had a mountain of evidence, I wanted to ensure I hadn't missed anything. If Lily was hiding more skeletons, I intended to unearth every single one. By mid-afternoon, the investigator called me with an update. He tracked Brandon's movements over the last few days and confirmed that he and Lily were still in contact, though things weren't going smoothly. According to the investigator, they'd met for lunch at a cafe downtown, and the interaction had been anything but romantic. "They were arguing," the investigator said. "It looked heated. At one point, the guy got up and walked out, leaving her sitting there." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Lily's perfect little fantasy was crumbling, and she had no idea just how much worse it was going to get. That evening, I decided it was time to start tightening the noose. As Lily sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I brought up a topic I knew would rattle her. "Hey," I said, feigning curiosity, "you ever hear about the Walshes? Brandon and Lauren?" Lily froze for a split second before recovering. "No. Why?" "Just something I heard at work," I said, keeping my tone light. "Apparently, they're going through a nasty split. Something about infidelity." Her face paled, and she quickly looked away. "That's unfortunate," she said, her voice tight. "Yeah, it's wild," I said, watching her squirm. "Guess you never really know people." She didn't respond, but I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew something was off, but she couldn't figure out what, and that was exactly where I wanted her. Later that night, while Lily was in the shower, I slipped into her office and unlocked her laptop. I'd long since learned her passwords. They were as predictable as the rest of her. Sure enough, her email inbox was a goldmine. I found several messages exchanged between her and Brandon, including a recent one where he'd lashed out at her, blaming her for his crumbling marriage. "Brandon, Lauren knows everything. She's filing for divorce, and it's all your fault. You promised me this would never blow back on me. I'm done." The email was only a day old, and it explained Lily's frayed nerves perfectly. I forwarded the messages to myself, ensuring I had yet another piece of evidence for my growing arsenal. When I returned to bed, Lily was already asleep, her face serene in the dim light. It was almost laughable how peaceful she looked, given the storm brewing around her. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, a small smile tugging at my lips. The noose was tightening, and soon there would be no escape. Wednesday morning started with Lily frantically typing on her phone at the breakfast table. Her usual calm demeanor was now entirely replaced with nervous energy. I sipped my coffee, pretending to be engrossed in the newspaper, but every word she muttered under her breath was like music to my ears. "I can't believe this," she hissed at her phone. "You're such a coward, Brandon." I raised an eyebrow, but kept my focus on the paper. "Everything okay?" I asked after a pause, making sure my tone was neutral. "Fine," she snapped, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just work drama." "Must be some serious drama," I said casually, folding the paper. "You've been on edge for days." Her eyes flickered with suspicion, but she didn't reply. Instead, she grabbed her bag and headed for the door, muttering something about being late for a meeting. As soon as she left, I reached out to Lauren. We'd exchanged a few messages by now, and she'd proven to be a valuable ally in this unfolding drama. I asked if Brandon had reached out again, and her reply didn't disappoint. "Lauren, oh, he's been blowing up my phone non-stop, apologizing, begging me to reconsider. You name it. He's panicking, but I've already made up my mind. He's not worth it." I told her I appreciated her updates and assured her that I had my own plans in motion. She wished me luck, and for a brief moment, I felt a sense of camaraderie with this woman who had been just as betrayed as I had. That afternoon, I received a call from the private investigator. He'd done some digging into Lily's financials and uncovered something interesting: a secret bank account. Over the past year, she had been siphoning small amounts of money from our joint account and funneling it into this separate account. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make me wonder what she was planning. "It could be nothing," the investigator said, "or it could be part of a bigger exit strategy." I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Was Lily planning to leave me? If so, she was in for a rude awakening. She might think she held the cards, but I was holding the whole deck. That evening, Lily came home late, looking exhausted. She barely acknowledged me as she dropped her bag by the door and headed straight for the kitchen. I followed her in, watching as she poured herself a glass of wine with trembling hands. "Tough day?" I asked, leaning against the counter. She sighed heavily. "You could say that." "Want to talk about it?" She hesitated, her gaze darting to me before quickly looking away. "No, it's nothing. Just work stress," I said, pretending to consider her answer. "You know, if there's anything bothering you, you can tell me. We're partners, after all." Her eyes snapped to mine, and for a brief moment, I thought she might crack. But then she plastered on her usual smile, the one she wore whenever she wanted to deflect. "Thanks," she said softly, "but I'm fine." I nodded, letting the moment pass. It didn't matter if she wanted to keep her secrets. I already knew them all. That night, I sat in my office, reviewing the growing mountain of evidence. The secret bank account, the emails with Brandon, the recordings and photos. It was all coming together. Lily thought she was untouchable, but she was about to learn just how wrong she'd been. Thursday morning arrived with a sense of anticipation. Everything was in place, and it was time to make my first move. Lily was still asleep when I slipped into my office, a cup of coffee in hand, and began crafting an anonymous email. This one wasn't for Lauren or anyone in Lily's personal circle. It was for her employer. I'd uncovered emails Lily had sent from her work account to Brandon, complete with explicit content and inappropriate exchanges that would make any HR department see red. Her company prided itself on professionalism and a strict code of conduct, and Lily's behavior was a direct violation. The email was short and direct, with attachments including screenshots of the emails and a brief note explaining the situation. I kept the tone professional, framing it as a concerned third party who thought they should know about this behavior from one of their employees. Once the email was sent, I sat back and waited. By midday, Lily's phone was blowing up with notifications. She'd taken the day off, claiming she wasn't feeling well, but the rising tension in her posture told me there was more to the story. She paced the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear, snapping at whoever was on the other end. "What do you mean they've escalated it to HR?" she hissed. "It's a misunderstanding. I don't know how those emails got out." I stayed out of her way, sipping my coffee and feigning indifference as she stomped around the house. Her carefully curated world was starting to implode, and the satisfaction was almost intoxicating. That evening, while Lily was distracted by her frantic attempts to salvage her reputation at work, I reached out to my lawyer. We finalized the next steps for filing for divorce, and I provided him with all the evidence I'd collected. My lawyer was impressed by the thoroughness of my documentation, calling it one of the most airtight cases he'd seen. "She's not going to see this coming," he said. "Good," I replied. "She doesn't deserve to." When Lily finally emerged from her makeshift office, she looked pale and frazzled. "Work is a nightmare right now," she said, her voice tight. "Some idiot must have hacked my email or something." "That's awful," I said, feigning concern. "Do they know who might have done it?" "No," she snapped, rubbing her temples. "They're investigating, but it's ridiculous. I didn't do anything wrong." I nodded sympathetically. "Hopefully it all works out." She gave me a strained smile, then retreated to the bedroom, leaving me alone in the living room. I watched her go, knowing this was just the beginning. The wheels were in motion, and there was no stopping them now. Her lies were unraveling, her lover had abandoned her, and her career was hanging by a thread. By the time I was done, she wouldn't just lose me, she'd lose everything. Friday morning greeted me with the sound of Lily slamming drawers in the bedroom. When I walked in, she was throwing clothes into a suitcase, her phone clutched in one hand and a tense expression on her face. "What's going on?" I asked, feigning concern. She shot me a glare. "Work wants me in the office immediately for a meeting with HR. They're calling it an urgent investigation." She yanked a blouse off its hanger, nearly tearing it in her haste. "I have no idea what's going on, but it's ridiculous." I tilted my head, pretending to think. "Maybe someone's trying to set you up?" Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Why would you say that?" I shrugged. "Just seems like someone might have it out for you. You've been under a lot of stress lately. Sometimes people notice and take advantage." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Instead, she zipped up her suitcase and stormed out of the room. After she left, I allowed myself a small smile. Her unraveling had officially begun, and the best part was that she still didn't know where the blows were coming from. But this wasn't just about her professional life. There was still plenty of work to be done on the personal front. That afternoon, I received an email from my lawyer confirming that our divorce paperwork was ready to file. I had insisted on including an infidelity clause, along with a request for sole ownership of our home and a significant portion of our shared assets. With the evidence I'd provided, the court would undoubtedly favor me. Lily's betrayal was about to cost her dearly. When Lily returned home that evening, she was a different person. Gone was the confident, composed woman I'd married. In her place was someone frazzled, defensive, and visibly afraid. She dropped her suitcase by the door and headed straight for the kitchen, pouring herself a large glass of wine. "Tough day?" I asked, stepping into the room. She glared at me over the rim of her glass. "You could say that. Want to talk about it?" She laughed bitterly. "Not really. HR is blowing everything out of proportion, and now they're talking about disciplinary action. It's insane." I nodded sympathetically. "Must be hard, dealing with something like that." She stared at me for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You've been acting weird lately," she said finally. "Like you know something I don't." I shrugged, keeping my face neutral. "Just trying to be supportive." "Yeah," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Supportive." That night, while Lily slept, I received another email, this time from Lauren. She had officially filed for divorce from Brandon and was moving out of their shared home. She thanked me again for exposing the affair, saying it had given her the strength to make the tough decisions she'd been avoiding. Her message ended with a simple but powerful sentiment: people like them deserve each other. I smiled at that. But Lily wasn't going to have Brandon, or me. When this was over, she'd end up with nothing, just as she deserved. By Saturday morning, Lily's nerves were visibly fraying. She barely acknowledged me as she moved through the house, her phone glued to her hand. Her focus was split between texting furiously and taking calls that always ended in heated whispers or slammed doors. Watching her unravel was like watching a play unfold, one where I already knew the ending. Around noon, I decided to turn the heat up a notch. While Lily was upstairs, I sent Brandon a message from a burner email account I'd created specifically for this purpose. The email was simple, containing only a single sentence and a photo of Lily and Brandon leaving the hotel together. Lily has been exposed. How much longer do you think you can keep hiding? I didn't expect a reply, but the purpose of the email wasn't a conversation. It was pressure. By now, Brandon was likely drowning in his own fallout, and this would only add to his paranoia. With his back against the wall, he'd become a liability to Lily. Perfect. That evening, Lily cornered me in the living room. She was visibly tense, her hands gripping the back of a chair as though steadying herself. "We need to talk," she said. "Sure," I replied, setting down my book. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, as if trying to gauge my reaction. "I think someone's been trying to sabotage me," she said carefully. "At work, with other things." I raised an eyebrow. "What makes you think that?" Her eyes searched mine, looking for something. "Maybe guilt, maybe confirmation." "There have been incidents," she said vaguely. "Emails, accusations. It's all ridiculous, of course, but I don't know. It feels personal." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral. "That sounds stressful." "It is," she snapped, then quickly softened her tone. "But I'll handle it. I always do." "Good to hear," I said calmly. "You've always been strong under pressure." Her lips twitched, but it wasn't a smile. She studied me for a moment longer before turning and walking away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. If she suspected anything, she wasn't ready to confront it yet. But her unease was palpable, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she cracked. Later that night, I received a call from the private investigator. He'd uncovered more evidence of Lily's secret financial dealings, withdrawals from her private account, and payments to a storage unit I hadn't known about. The pieces were falling into place, and I was already imagining the look on her face when I presented her with the truth. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. There were still a few pieces left to arrange before the grand finale. Sunday morning dawned quietly, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. Lily was up early, pacing the kitchen with her phone glued to her ear. From the snippets of her hushed conversation, it was clear things were spiraling further out of her control. "You can't just ghost me, Brandon," she hissed, her voice cutting through the quiet. "We're in this together. Don't you dare pin this all on me." She ended the call with an angry jab at her phone, then stood there for a moment, staring at the counter. When she finally noticed me standing in the doorway, she forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Morning," she said, her voice strained. "Morning," I replied, watching her carefully. "Everything okay?" "Just work stuff," she said quickly, brushing past me to pour herself some coffee. "Must be a lot of work stuff lately," I remarked casually. "You've been on edge all week." She froze for a fraction of a second before turning to face me, her expression carefully neutral. "It's just a busy time," she said. "Nothing I can't handle." "Of course," I said with a small smile. "You've always been good at handling things." The double meaning wasn't lost on her. She studied me for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she grabbed her coffee and retreated to her office, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That afternoon, I decided it was time to escalate. Using the information from the private investigator, I paid a visit to the storage unit Lily had been secretly renting. I'd brought a copy of the lease agreement the investigator had uncovered, which listed her as the primary renter, along with a few choice documents proving her identity. The facility manager didn't ask too many questions after that. The unit itself was small and nondescript, tucked in the corner of the building. Inside, I found a collection of items that painted a picture of Lily's double life. Expensive clothes I'd never seen her wear, keepsakes from her time with Brandon, and even a box of prepaid debit cards, likely part of her plan to make a clean break when the time came. I took photos of everything, documenting the contents before locking the unit back up. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was premeditated. She'd been planning to leave me, probably for Brandon, all while pretending to be the perfect wife. The sheer audacity of it all reignited my resolve. That evening, Lily returned to the house after running errands, her expression distant. I decided to test her one more time, pushing her closer to the edge. Busy day? I asked as she settled onto the couch. Just the usual, she replied without looking at me. Funny, I said, leaning against the armrest. I stopped by a storage facility today. Thought I'd pick up some things for the house. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide. What? Yeah, I continued, feigning nonchalance. Interesting place. Lots of secrets hiding in those little units, don't you think? She stared at me, her face a mix of confusion and panic. For the first time, she seemed genuinely speechless. I mean, who knows what someone might find in a place like that? I said, standing up and stretching. It's a good thing we don't have any secrets, right? I didn't wait for her response. I walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there, pale and silent. Monday morning began with an email from my lawyer. The divorce papers were officially filed, and Lily would be served within the week. Everything was in motion, and there was no turning back now. Lily, oblivious to the storm brewing around her, was back to pacing the kitchen with her phone. From her clipped tone, I guess she was talking to Brandon again. You're pathetic, she spat into the phone. This isn't all on me, you know. You were right there with me, making promises. Don't try to weasel out of it now. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Trouble with work? I asked innocently. She whirled around, startled. What? No, just dealing with a difficult client. Ah, I said with a nod. You've had a lot of those lately. She didn't respond, her eyes narrowing as she studied me. For a brief moment, it looked like she wanted to say something, but she shook her head and stormed past me, muttering under her breath. That afternoon, Lily was served the divorce papers. I watched from the living room window as the courier handed her the envelope. She stared at it, frozen, before glancing back toward the house. Our eyes met through the glass, and I held her gaze with calm, cold detachment. She stormed inside, the papers clutched in her hand. What the hell is this? She demanded, waving the envelope. It's exactly what it looks like, I replied, my voice even. I'm divorcing you. Her face turned red with fury. You can't be serious. After everything? I cut her off with a laugh, shaking my head. After everything? You mean after you lied to my face? After you carried on an affair with Brandon and made a fool of me? Don't insult me, Lily. She opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand, silencing her. I know everything. The hotel meetings, the emails, the storage unit. Every single thing you thought you were hiding, I found. Her face went pale, the color draining away as the weight of my words sank in. You've been spying on me? I've been gathering the truth, I said coldly. You built our marriage on lies, and you thought you could walk away unscathed. You were wrong. For the first time, Lily seemed truly shaken. She sank onto the couch, the divorce papers trembling in her hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she whispered. I didn't mean to. Stop, I said sharply. Don't insult me by pretending this was some accident. You made choices, Lily. Calculated choices. And now, you're going to face the consequences. She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with tears. I'll lose everything. That's not my problem, I replied, my tone devoid of sympathy. You did this to yourself. That night, Lily stayed in the guest room. I heard her crying through the thin walls, but it didn't stir the slightest bit of pity in me. She'd spent months lying, betraying, and plotting her escape. Now, she was the one trapped, and I felt nothing but satisfaction. The final act was coming, and when it did, there would be no escape for her. Tuesday morning dawned heavy with tension. Lily had spent the night in the guest room, and her silence over breakfast was deafening. She avoided my gaze, her eyes fixed on her coffee cup as if it held answers to problems she could no longer solve. I decided it was time for the final blow. After she left for work, I sent out an email to a carefully curated list of recipients. Her boss, key colleagues, a few mutual friends, and, most importantly, her parents. Attached were the photos, recordings, and emails documenting her affair and deceit. The message was straightforward. Subject: the truth about Lily Carter. To whom it may concern, I believe it's important for everyone to know the truth about Lily Carter's actions. Below, you'll find evidence of her infidelity, betrayal, and violations of trust, both personal and professional. I regret that it has come to this, but transparency is the only path forward. Best regards, James Carter. That afternoon, I received the first ripple of fallout. A call from one of our mutual friends, Sarah, confirmed the email had landed exactly as intended. James, I don't even know what to say, she stammered. I knew something was off, but this? Lily's been lying to all of us. I thought you deserved to know, I replied calmly. This isn't the kind of person any of us thought she was. She's going to hate you for this, Sarah warned, her voice tinged with concern. Good, I said. She deserves it. When Lily came home that evening, her face was ashen. She dropped her bag at the door and fixed me with a glare that could have melted steel. You sent that email, she spat, her voice trembling with rage. I did, I said, unflinching. Everyone knows the truth now. You ruined my life, she screamed, her fists clenched at her sides. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've done nothing but reveal who you really are, I said coldly. Your actions ruined your life, Lily. All I did was pull back the curtain. She lunged at me then, her fury boiling over, but I stepped aside, letting her collapse onto the couch in a storm of tears and broken sobs. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences.